Hello and welcome to the Diva Alive episode 11 review. I'm Callan.
And I'm Honey Panda Bunny. I enjoyed it for the most part, but I do actually feel kind of lacking towards what happened with Hirana here. I definitely feel like if this was a longer series, this could have been a two-parter, the kind of rise and fall that she has. I thought it was really interesting that we get to see her at her lowest point, because earlier in the series we did discuss we'd actually like to see her, how she'd handle having a loss. And this is, I feel very realistic for her, battling the champion and feeling so low at this low point. But I do wish it had been a bit more. I wish we'd had a bit more of it, instead of it feeling quite rushed for me.
Yeah, I do agree this episode feels rushed, because this is the second time that this series has had a really good cliffhanger, and then the follow-up has been somewhat lukewarm. And in this case, it feels worse, as the episode seems to ignore a lot of what was set up. In retrospective, it mars a lot of the potential that the previous episode had set up. I would agree that this episode was fine. I thought it was an okay episode, and I actually do really like the stuff with Hirana. And the reconciling, it's as you said, it does feel a little bit rushed, and it does come off as somewhat of a missed opportunity. So we start with Hirana in her room, and obviously she's reflecting on the last episode, and this is the only time in the episode that really deals with the fallout of Excel's beatdown on her. She's reminiscing about Eternal Girl, only to have that overtaken by Excel talking about how you weren't supposed to have limits on yourself, you were supposed to have no limits. And I actually really did like this scene. It felt really with the dream sequence, and it's just too bad that after this bit, the episode just seemingly drops this aspect for the rest of the episode.
I did actually, like you, really enjoy this beginning bit in the sense of it feels almost realistic. Sometimes it can only take one bad experience with a person and it can completely mar the thing that you love. And it's really interesting to see Hirana kind of have her favourite thing almost, I don't want to say ruined, tainted, yeah, by someone that she thought she could share the same love with. If you think back, she had that wonderful episode where they were looking for the taiyaki and they were having fun together, and then for her to be literally beaten by Excel within an inch of her life must have been so traumatizing for her.
It's just too bad that the episode itself doesn't really deal on their two relationship, their dynamic. It's not really touched on in this episode that much. So we then cut to a scene with Mika P, and she's planning something called Take a Chance Diva, which is giving lower ranked teams a chance to face Deus Ex Machina. And she sees it as entertaining even if the other teams potentially break. And it's very ominous with the creepy music playing, and we see Mika P's reaction. She has this very evil face. This plan isn't really elaborated on for the rest of the episode, except for maybe the ending, and it feels a bit weird that this is just being introduced now, and it does make me think that they may be planning a season 2, as I just can't see how this will be resolved within the next episode, unless it's heavily rushed, which might happen with this series.
I'm really interested to see what's going to happen here. We're kind of getting like a little bit of darkness here, and I'm intrigued to see what's going to happen, but I'm wondering if it's going to evolve around Eternal Girl, and whether this kind of beatdown of the top league is maybe Mika P's way of kind of luring all of Eternal Girl to come back together into a group. I'm wondering if it's that.
Mika P's character feels a little bit disjointed, because when she was first introduced with Card Jockey, she seemed like the hard, strict boss. But in the end, she did relent and give them the song despite losing. And then on her appearances, sometimes she's annoyed with Deus Ex Machina, and in this episode, she's obviously got her plan. I would have liked just a little bit more continuity with Mika P's actions.
Yeah. I mean, I still feel like, personally, this obviously is just a theory at this point. I feel like she's puppeteering things to try and lure Eternal Girl back together at the minute. But we'll see, because that could completely get thrown out.
So we see the other teams reacting to the announcement of the Take a Chance Diva, and they're all game, obviously. So Diagram, who continue to be my favourite surprise team, we have Madoka and Sanga both be the first to address the situation with No Limit, with Mujika feeling that of course No Limit will be there. Something that I really like is subtly, this team has been the one that has formed quite the strong bond with No Limit.
I really enjoyed seeing this scene as well. Like, Musica is always a favourite of mine now. I do like that all of the teams kind of have this understanding with No Limit, and they're also connected, that they're just like, oh no, their name is like literally No Limit. They'll come back and they'll be here too.
So we get the resolution that was obvious for Hirana after the last episode, which is that she decides to quit being a diva. However, the episode just sidesteps the assault insult that Excel had given her, and it focuses more on Hirana feeling that she just can't match up to Deus Ex Machina. And unfortunately, I feel that this undermines Hirana's motives, because it comes off as her just quitting because she can't beat the strongest team right now, when they could easily focus, regather, face the teams that are in their current rank, and just slowly rise up the ranks and then face them in a rematch. She also comes off as being selfish to Akino and Rei because of her own inability. If this episode had referenced more the trauma of what Excel had done to her, I could see that affecting her decision making and making this plot point feel a bit much more working better.
Yeah, for me, I had an issue of, it's kind of a bit later on in the episode as well, but where Hirana's like, oh, I lost this many times, and I don't feel like that should have been the point that should be taken from this. It should have been, I was humiliated and terribly treated in front of a crowd of audience, and then even with like Akino, maybe she could have been like, oh yeah, I sympathise with that situation because I've been with an audience that's laughed at me when something like that's happened.
That's a good point. They do have previous experiences with someone who on stage has affected stage fright, and this is something that could have been brought up, but the episode, it does not mention it at all. That's a very good point. When Hirana knocks the deck box out of Akino's hands, essentially discarding Diva battles, we see that it's a good thing that those deck boxes are incredibly waterproof. And also those deck boxes are actually really cool. I wonder if those will be like a real thing that they could sell. So we see that No Limit No shows a match, which naturally worries everyone, against Diagram. And Tamago says that the battle with Deus Ex Machina has had an unexpected effect on No Limit, to which my reaction is, no really. Because despite the fact that these teams were there, they saw the beatdown, they were even telling her to stop, and they don't really act like it here. It's really weird that that bit of the episode just seems to have either been forgotten by everyone. But then this is also made somewhat confusing in literally the next scene with Universe's beginning and Akino, because they then theorize that that Deus Ex Machina were intentionally trying to break Hirana, which I'm just going to assume is their theory, because it doesn't really line up with Axel's spur of the moment, and the fact that the other two members didn't seem really involved in it.
Yeah, and they did actively try to stop Excel as well. So I don't think it was premeditated. I think it was literally a spur of the moment. She kind of lost it a little bit.
That's what I mean, is this episode feels like some stuff's been rewritten from the past episode and just no one got the memo. So Sanga gets really emotional in a confrontation with Rei and talks about how can the team break up after just one bad loss, and especially because Rei left them for No Limit. And it's not really malicious that Sanga's doing this, and I really like the callback to their collective arc. They have unfinished business with No Limit and they still want to beat them, and it's actually a really good scene that not only shows the growth of Madoka and Sanga, but also a potential rematch down the line.
I am really excited to see this because the amount that they've grown, and I also want to see Rei as the centre, and I feel that would be like a perfect time for Rei to be the centre, but I don't feel like we're going to see that in this season, and only if we get a second season, and I'm not sure.
So we finally get the big build-up scene with Hirana and the card shop owner talking. It feels like that this had been hinted at, and it was fine, but it felt a little bit, I was expecting more emotions. I was even wondering if we would potentially get a reveal, and it's mostly her, the card shop owner, trying to get Hirana to realise that nothing is certain in Diva battles, and that's until you draw the cards you don't know what's going to happen. She encourages Hirana to remember her favourite Eternal Girl, which is Azella, who is Hirana's favourite, and of course that's who the card shop owner probably is. She gets a call from Lion to watch the battles, and I wonder if Deus Ex Machina battling all these teams one after another is in a way to mimic Eternal Girl's 100 team gauntlet. It's not really brought up in the episode, so it's probably just a coincidence, but it is something that I noticed.
Yeah, it is really cool, and I would like to see that kind of like all-out battle royale again, but I have a feeling that if No Limit eventually made it to the top, we'd probably see that in their episode.
So we come to the battles in the Take a Chance Diva, and if there are any fallout from Excel's actions from the previous episode, we don't see them here. The crowd seems to have forgotten, which I wouldn't mind as much if this was a commentary on how fickle fans can be, but again, it's not really addressed, so again it feels like a forgotten plot point when it was literally the last episode. So we get the reveal that Card Jockey, due to being in the same agency, has had scrim matches against Deus Ex Machina. They are currently 0 and 162, but haven't let them stop them from wanting to one day beat them. This does retroactively undermine Excel's motives, when supposedly there was already a team that had that drive she was looking for. I can see it as despite the drive that Card Jockey have, they still haven't been able to come Deus Ex Machina, and that for Excel, it's not just about giving up, but it's also embodying her own reverence for Eternal Girl as this goal to be reached. And I think even with this reveal, it doesn't necessarily ruin Excel's actions, but it does muddy the waters a little bit, and it just feels weird that this plot line was introduced.
As we were watching it, I discussed oh, well, all these teams are taking these losses really well, and even with like no diagrams battle with them, they're like, Musica's like crying, but she's like, oh, we'll do better next time. That's like my only problem with it, of no one really says, oh, there's no way we could have beaten them. It's, oh, we'll work harder for next time.
It's also the other big missed opportunity of this episode. We don't really see anything from Excel's point of view. She's barely in this episode, and she acts like the last episode didn't happen. What does she think about these teams? We don't really see how she's reacting to them rather than just generic fight lines. And I really wanted to see where she was doing mentally in this episode. Does she have any regrets for what she did to Hirana? Has she potentially just emotionally closed herself off, and that's why she's acting like nothing happened? That would be a really interesting plot point to go, but they don't even hint at it if that is the case. Excel feels like a completely different character from the last episode. So Hirana watches the battles and wonders how they can keep going despite the fact that they are losing. And she reignites with her old teammates from the first episode, which makes their appearance in the last episode feel even more pointless. Why didn't they just save it as a surprise here? They bring up that they were her first selectors / fans, and again this feels a little bit unearned. The fan aspect of the Diva battles was only really relevant in the first episode and hasn't really been touched again since. I actually really do like the idea of it being a collective of the card shop owner, other teams, and even her old teammates helping her overcome this. The execution does feel a little bit botched.
I also feel like Rei and Akino were really put to the wayside here, even though like the last couple of episodes have been so centered on working together as a team. We barely see Rei and Akino talk with Hirana about this, and I understand that they did have the talk where Hirana like knocked the cards away. I wish I'd seen maybe even if they text her and been like, oh Hirana, we're here for you when you're ready.
In the case of Akino, Universe's beginning had suggested giving Hirana some distance to allow her to think. But yeah, it does feel a little bit weird that the two people that she's supposedly closest with weren't there for her in her time of need. So after all that, Hirana fishes out the deck from the pond and reignites with Akino and Rei. And obviously they were both just about to go and see her, so there is a little bit of credence to the fact that they were going to go help her, it's just we didn't really get to see it. I don't really have a lot to say here, because it plays out fairly as you'd expect. Hirana's regained her wanting to fight again, she wants to fight with those two are obviously more than happy to continue.
Along, yeah.
It's very heartwarming, but it does feel a little bit rushed. This is all done within like the last 2 minutes of the episode. It goes into that idea that this episode feels very rushed. It would have maybe helped if this had been 2 episodes.
I also, if it had been 2 episodes, I would have really loved to have seen a bit more of Akino and Rei's perspective on the loss, because we only really see Hirana's, and yeah, she takes it really difficult, obviously with that beatdown with Excel, but it must have been traumatizing. You could have gone into Akino being like, oh gosh, Hirana's going through something like what I've been through, and then with Rei it could have been, oh, this is the first time where she's like, oh, my teammate's just giving up, because obviously she has a big problem with, it doesn't matter whether you win or lose, but it matters about how much effort you want to put into the game, and it would have been interesting to see Rei's perspective with that with Hirana, and their own takings on losing to the top A-class team. They both would have felt really upset about this too.
I do think that there is a missed opportunity there as well, because as you said, there's the thing where Akino faced a similar problem that Hirana does in this episode, which would have been really good. There was also the teasing, as I mentioned in the last episode, that Rei's reaction of that frustration that she also faced. We don't really know, they don't even really address that. Was it the case of she's just upset that she can't help Hirana, or if it was her own inability? So we come to the ending, and I still find this a little bit confusing for myself, which is we cut to Excel seeing the entrance period of the Take a Chance Diva has ended, and she looks shocked as creepy, ominous music plays, and then it fades out. And I think you can read this as either it's sad that despite reuniting, No Limit won't be getting their rematch, in which case I feel that the framing is more malicious than tragic, so I'm not sure it's that, or if it's part of Mika P's plan she alludes to at the start. There isn't really any hints into the episode as to what this could be. So overall it just feels like a very weird ending, and I don't know what this is leading to in the final episode.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I do want to see what's going to happen here, and I see it as Excel being disappointed that No Limit aren't there, and she's kind of getting that spur of the moment maliciousness back. That's the way I see it, but it could completely change in the next episode.
Something I noticed as well is in the battle, Deus Ex Machina seem more colder than they do normally. The other two as well, they were very business-like, and I'm wondering if that's just something that will maybe be addressed in the next episode, because they just seemed a little bit out of character in this episode.
Yeah, we get Machina and she like makes a joke halfway through, but it's like really deadpan and while she's doing an attack, and it just came off as a bit awkward.
It feels like Deus Ex Machina had an episode that's just been cut that we've not seen anything about, so I'm hoping that this will get addressed within the next episode. And the ED was very nice as well. We get Eternal Girl singing the opening, and it's a nice reprise. Even if I don't really have much to say on it, I do wonder that with the card shop owner showing an Eternal Girl card earlier and then having this song, I'm wondering if down the line we might see an Eternal Girl battle.
I'd be really interested to see that. Deus Ex Machina versus Eternal Girl maybe, and XL finally gets the battle that she's hoping for, or maybe even No Limit versus Eternal Girl. I'm really excited to see what's going to come from
I think with one episode to go, there's a lot of hinting of stuff down the line that I just feel can't be resolved with one episode, and I'm thinking that they are planning on announcing a season 2 potentially. So overall, I thought this was a mess of an episode. I feel like the bare bones of the episode were really good. I do like Hirana overcoming her struggles, but a lot of what's happening around it feels a little bit mismanaged, or it just feels weirdly rewritten, especially from the last episode. The fact that the cliffhanger is barely addressed is just very strange to me. I have no idea how this will all be resolved with one episode, and I'm still not sure what they're doing with the introduction of Mika P's potential larger threat down the line. But of course, it's how you leave them, and a good ending can salvage some flaws, so let's hope for a decent conclusion.
I'm really excited to see the conclusion to all of this, and along with the episode as a whole, I really wanted to enjoy it because there were some really good ideas there, but they all felt quite like half-baked. It felt like the beginning of those ideas were put in, but they never really had a big payoff. Because I like the idea of her old teammates and all of the people that are around Hirana helping her, but because of only being able to do it in one episode, it all felt very rushed, and it didn't feel like those characters really got to spend that time with them, especially because we have such a large cast. So it was still interesting to see the ideas, but I just wished they'd had a bit more time to spend on them, I think.
How I would describe it is it feels like these last 2 episodes had 2 entirely different writers and they didn't share notes.
Yeah, it does feel a little bit like that.
So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much.
Until next time.
Bye bye.